Why would the church in its liturgy for today's Mass? I mean, we're in the second letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. We finished with chapter 3, and now we're chapter 8. So obviously when we go through these books, the church doesn't give us every single little word, from the letter in her, readings for daily Mass. And so again, it begs the question, here St. Paul in this first reading is talking about, giving money to the church in Jerusalem. Well, why is that any concern to us? Well, the reason is that there's some deeper, in terms of the life of faith in our spiritual lives, there are some very important lessons in St. Paul's concern for the church of Jerusalem. And he begins with giving the Corinthians an example of the people in Macedonia. Okay, so that's how the first reading begins. He says this: "We want you to know, brothers and sisters, of the grace of God that has been given to the churches of Macedonia." Okay, so what did they do? Well, this is what they did. In a severe test of affliction, while they were suffering, an abundance of their joy and their profound poverty overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For according to their means, I can testify, and beyond their means, spontaneously, they begged us insistently for the favor of taking part in the service to the holy ones. And this, not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord and to us through the will of God. So, while the people in Macedonia were afflicted, while they were still poor, their own eagerness, their own desire, they still wanted to give to the church in Jerusalem. Isn't that quite remarkable? It's so easy for us to give a little bit of extra in the abundance of what we have. But they, while they have very little, they still gave according to their means, and they did so with joy and an eagerness to do it. Okay? So again, St. Paul is trying to convince the Corinthians to be generous for the church in Jerusalem. And as I said at the beginning of last week, there's this kind of hesitation due to some part of these super apostles who have come in and kind of discredited the work of Paul and telling him that he's kind of a shady character. But out of all this, what the Macedonians can teach us and what St. Paul is trying to teach us is that Christ, first and foremost, out of his poverty, makes us rich. And so what drove the people in Macedonia, what they did, okay, was the fact that they were motivated by the works of Jesus Christ. Okay, that's where the generosity comes from. Christ became poor and gave himself entirely to us so that we can become rich. And again, it's a great reading to have within the context of Mass because, again, in the Mass, we are enriched with an overabundance of graces from Christ's giving of his body and blood over for us in the Eucharist. And that's why, again, the church inserts this section, okay? Again, a section that seems to just deal with some temporal stuff and some pastoral matters. But there's just a great lesson to be in here, okay? Always remember that God is never outdone in generosity, okay? He gives everything of himself to us. We give everything of ourselves back to God and to our fellow neighbor. And God is going to continue to bless us in our works, just like he's going to do to the people of Macedonia, just like St. Paul is trying to tell the Corinthians what's going to happen to them, and also what he's going to do for us. May God bless you.